recording thing.
Oh, very nice. The red light. The red light.
Yeah.
So come this way.
Come this way.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like that?
Yeah, just want to make sure you're in frame. You were got you a little chopped off last episode.
Oh no.
Was it?
Yeah, a little bit.
I just didn't want to be
Last
next to
one
you.
was Ryan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we met. It's funny. We met Ryan at Hub and Spoke with Dynamo VC, and it was just him. He was like, "I just started the company,"
Yeah, you're right.
and now he's 30 people, and it's just cool.
Yeah.
Cool to see how much he's grown. He's an animal.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. The interview was awesome.
Oh, appreciate
you
it.
guys
Yeah.
covered a ton.
Yeah.
It's always funny hearing other founders' stories about raising and you ask questions like,
Yeah.
fun, right? It's like,
It's
No.
like a living hell.
No, it's like a prostate exam.
no, it's quite miserable.
A continuous prostate exam.
Yeah.
It doesn't end.
Yeah. Yeah, the doctor's like, why don't we
Yeah.
see you next board meeting?
Yeah.
Great. Can't
No, and in
wait.
between.
Yeah. And in between,
As a
I'd like
matter of
to-
fact, we're just going to install a camera in your ear.
yeah,
That's what it is.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and send me these updates?
We're on.
Yeah, mics are
recording
high.
yet.
Oh yeah, we are. Of course we are.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm gonna have
Chris.
to.
I
I think,
I'm gonna
you
have
have to give a warning for that.
Yeah. This is one
exercise.
party.
No, it's fine. I'll bleep it out. I need to use that
Cold
plugin
open.
I got. So how long have you guys been here in the building?
Probably about 2.
Yeah, I
well,
think
coming up on 3 years.
coming
We did
up
a
on
3 year
3
late,
years
3 year
here,
lease.
yeah.
Okay, because you were saying that you've been like kicking around this building for a super long time, and so has Rich. And
Yeah.
so,
So our co-founder Glenn, his first company was here. It was an internet company startup called Koofers.com, which was like a social studying platform.
You can say
Okay.
what it was. It helped kids cheat their way through college.
Correct.
Word.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then there's some fun stories there. And so it was like their first internet startup. You don't need to make money. You just need to get users and just drive growth. Turns out you need to make money at some point.
Yeah.
And they tried to do. I saw you all came from like Living Social at one
Came
point.
through Living Social.
Fair.
So the company before, just so you know, the company before Living Social was InfoEther, which is up there on the 4th floor.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So there was a VC in the space before us that went out of business. That VC went out of business. And when I was looking for the space, we went up there and I'm like, I've been in this space before. It was all windows.
Yeah.
up there.
Right.
I'm like, I've been in this space. I'm like, oh my gosh, I pitched the VC that was in here. Oh, they're out of business.
Yeah, terrible deja
And I'm not.
That's funny.
Yeah. So
Anyway, so they tried to do like the whole Living Social deals for college kids, but turns out college kids are poor and don't have any money. So
Yeah.
that didn't really work out, but it was a fun ride. It was a good time. I interned there. That's where I met Glenn, and then we've done a couple companies together. Now we did a consulting company together where Noah was. Noah and I worked at Deloitte together. Went to college together. We started like a boutique consulting firm around containers and serverless architectures, like very early back in the day. That got bought by Blackstone and then merged with another
pull your mic up.
cloud SI company.
Yeah. I think you can like do one of these things.
Yeah, you can put wherever you want.
There we go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because otherwise when you pull away, it kind of.
Yeah, totally. And so it was really fun. It was a good time. But one of our first customers was in this building, and so Glenn's always keeps saying like he keeps coming back to this building. And then when we were looking for an office, we had started in Glenn's basement, then gone to the co-working space at Spaces, and then needed a bigger office and ended up here.
It's the gravitational pull of the Reston startup scene, especially for warehouses. It's kind of a hotbed.
It is. It's almost like a hub spot. Anyway, we were in the what was it? Not the other cohort, Regis.
The Regis.
So
Yeah.
we were in
Over
Regis
Town
in the
Center,
Reston
yeah.
Town Center.
Yep.
Oh, we toured that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at
So
that.
we moved from there to here.
Oh, wow.
Because we needed space, and we'd
Yeah.
been in this building before, right? So my
Right.
prior company, InfoEther, we were here for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And the we were just looking around buildings, and we found out like the space was available, and I'm like, oh, I remember this building. Like we were all in this building working together before we got acquired by Living Social,
Right.
and then we went through the Living Social thing, and then I started Cargo Sense after that. But then I was in, at that point we were in there in Regis because we just needed one office. Then we expanded to 2 offices, and then we were at 3 offices, and we were constantly going back and forth. We had sensor inventory, and
Right.
It was
so
such a mess.
tight.
I was going to say, I bet all the accountants and lawyers in Regis were just thrilled
Well,
to get you
yeah,
all
they
out.
loved us. Yeah.
Cooley is our attorney,
Right.
and they're right there. Yeah. So I know Mike Lincoln from a long time ago, but. It was nice. The Regis space used to be above that same building that Cooley's in, which is above that Starbucks. Then they moved it to right above the fountain. Like where the fountain is now, that's where the Regis space is now. So they used to have 2, and then they consolidated into the 1 because somebody bought that floor. So we had to move out of there, and then we moved in here. But yeah, no, we love this building. And parking's easy. Like it's just so
I mean, it's
nice.
so convenient. Yeah, you can get everywhere. Yeah, especially for
And now that we know you guys are here, you can play volleyball with us.
yeah, I was gonna say
We have the volleyball court.
Yeah, we go down and play basketball all the time.
Yeah, we play horse to settle design arguments sometimes. So we're definitely
Nice.
not above a trial by sport.
I just make the decision. No, I don't.
Benevolent dictator.
Sometimes. Yeah, might as well get this started for real, huh? You've seen the show, so we do a little dance break, and then we introduce you.
Yeah.
This is number 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did it.
Yeah.
We got to 10.
Well, we got to 10.
Yeah.
I guess, what does that mean?
I don't know.
You went one more than 9.
Yeah.
Double digits.
Double
Yeah,
digits. There's some,
yeah.
a lot of podcasts don't make it to 10.
Don't get there. So it's
Okay.
like
Okay. That's good.
It's
Yay.
split. All right. So here at the Crossdock today, we've got 2 of the co-founders of Takt, the warehouse intelligence platform aimed at helping retailers, 3PLs, and e-commerce companies better manage their warehouse workforces. Did I do you justice?
Yeah.
That's
All
good.
right. Joining us today is Chief Technology Officer Alex Rhea and Chief Product Officer Noah MacMichael.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for coming down, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Literally coming downstairs.
Yeah, it was a long
Walking
commute.
the long walk from
Yeah.
upstairs.
I mean, yeah, it can be. Like we don't have any real reason to get up there too often. Like we
We need
just
to keep
kind of
getting,
get
we
to the
need to
cafe.
keep getting
and-
supply chain companies in this building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we got Inmarsat,
Yep.
kind of like that.
Yeah.
So we just keep get rid of everybody that's not a
Yes,
supply chain company.
squeeze them out.
Yeah.
Made DC metro area the supply chain mecca of Mid-Atlantic.
Right.
Well, I think
Well,
you
of
said last
technology.
time on the podcast that there's that trucker tools Wi-Fi
Right.
that
Yes.
we can't find. I've said the same thing. It's a mystery.
It's just
There's an access point plugged in with trucker tools on it somewhere.
yeah. No,
somewhere.
I poked them about it, and they said that they used to be here, and that they had like a space that they just had a bunch of swag in, like corporate swag that maybe they still have it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
we're just scraping all of your data.
right. Yeah, we're just like tracking you in and out of the office. Yeah, it was an interesting bit of lore. I poked them all on LinkedIn after that episode. It was like, hey, so
that's
what?
funny.
So like, come on, like, what's the deal? Why are you here? Anyway, yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you all got started. Well, you kind of filled us in a little bit, and I'm putting all the pieces together. So you two have been working together for a super long time. Is that like the case with the entire founding group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell the beginning and then maybe you pick it up. So, the 3 of us have worked together for a really long time. We don't come from supply chain. We come from technology. Noah and I started our careers at Deloitte doing federal IT consulting. If you live in the DC area, you do a stint either in the government, for the government, one of the two.
Yep.
And so we started there, got exposed to a cloud project when I was there and was like, this is the future. I'm tired of managing SharePoint sites and whatever. And ended up joining Glenn, our third co-founder, who I had interned at his previous company. They were starting a new consulting company focused on new architectures in the cloud, containers, serverless, and we were fortunate enough to partner with Docker in the very early days and sort of rode that wave with them and doing early container implementations in the enterprise. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning along the way, a lot of, oh, by the way, guys, we rewrote that whole component. It doesn't work that way anymore. But it was really fun. It was a really good time. Got exposed to a lot of big companies. And Noah joined that company. We were about 10, 12 people, just focused on helping companies re-architect their large enterprise apps for the cloud, and ended up getting bought by Blackstone, joining a CloudReach was the name of the company, is SI, focused on cloud modernization, cloud migration, and that's where we all spent 2 or so years. I was in the consulting practice. Noah, you were in the software business, and then after my time there, I ended up joining Amazon as part of their government business, so helping government customers in GovCloud as well as some of the other clouds that may or may not exist, and then ended up finishing my time there on the Kubernetes team at AWS. And so really good time. And then the opportunity for Takt arose, and 3 years later, here we are. So why don't you tell the...
Yeah, I mean, I think between Glenn, Alex, and I think, especially when starting a new company, it's important to realize what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think we all bring different strengths and weaknesses. And more than anything, we enjoy working with each other and learning from each other. And so we had always kind of kept the door open to say, hey, if there's an opportunity to work together in the future, let's keep our eyes open. So we went through a bunch of B2C and other fun ideas that would be great, but make no money. And so kind of along the way, we almost happened into supply chain and just fell in love with it. We spent months just going to different distribution centers, warehouses, and being people who weren't from industry, just asked a bunch of dumb questions. One of the things that we tell the story, we were walking a distribution center out in Martinsburg, West Virginia, 45 minutes, an hour from here. Two things really stood out to us is technology, and really legacy technology companies have left the supply chain behind, right? You walk the floor, how many blue and black screens do you see? They measure page load time in minutes, not seconds. Like, it's crazy, right? We wouldn't accept that from, internally. I don't accept that from the apps that I use at home. And so we said, like, hey, there's a better way to do it. And then it was also peak COVID where if the workforce wasn't available, quote unquote, nobody wants to work these days. All of the, the pressures that came with that. And we just looked at the tools that were out there that would help with labor management. And they were really baked in finding your lowest 10% of your workforce, firing them, and then going to find another 10%. That's just not realistic, right? And not only that, it's probably also not the right way to treat your people. Yeah. And so it was sort of this confluence of challenging ourselves with the new problem, having the opportunity to work with your friends. And I don't know, I love supply chain. I love the customers that I work with. It's so different from federal technology in Deloitte, but we love it.
And I think it was really apparent to us that I remember a very senior person in a company we were interviewing had said, well, volume cures all woes in the warehouse. And it was very clear that works when a labor is super abundant, but when you can't just go on the street and hire 500 more people tomorrow, that doesn't work anymore. And as they were introducing more automation and robotics, and we can get to that down the road, we definitely saw that there was the software landscape inside the warehouse where it was traditionally defined as WMS, TMS, LMS, OMS, other MSs, was going to break down. And so for us, that was a great opportunity to solve all those challenges. And it's been quite a wild ride over the last 3 years. But
yeah, so that leads me into a big question that I have about what you guys do is really like what for you is the kind of the demarcation between like a warehouse management system for one of your customers, if it exists. Yeah. And like where your platform then, picks up the ball.
I think from a technology side, everyone will tell you that data integration is super difficult in supply chain broadly, but from speaking personally inside the warehouse, oftentimes we find that customers don't just have one WMS; they actually have 2, 3, 10.
We've talked to people where
10.
Like, we were talking to a company that had bought another company,
exactly,
and so they have 2 WMSs, and the warehouse is effectively split.
Yep.
And like everything delivered on this side is in this WS, and then they have to move what rack locations are between what WMS based on volume.
Yeah, I've seen people carry around both sets of scanners, like the Wild West. You have to decide which system.
Totally. No, and we have a customer that is a 3PL that grew through acquisition, and every building is a different WMS because it's a different company they acquired.
Or they have customer WMS, which is super common as well. Yeah, inside the same 4 walls.
Totally, and they range from modern cloud WMS with APIs to AS400 mainframes running in the closet. And so, to get back to the question, we have to be able to integrate with all of those and provide that single pane of glass across their performance. What we quickly learned was the WMS, while it has a lot of data, is not the single source of truth. There's oftentimes a lot of work in the warehouse that occurs outside the WMS. And so oftentimes in these warehouses, there's 20 to 30%, sometimes 40% of their labor that is happening that is not tracked in another system. And then you have time clock data and things like that. And now with robotics, you have this whole new set of data that's coming in. And so what our system does is we sit across the top of all of those systems, bring all of that data together, make it all align and essentially clean that data and present really purpose-built dashboards, tools for operations, engineering, finance, and HR to ultimately run their business and ultimately drive improvement. And I think historically that has been labor management because that is how work has gotten done in the warehouse.
Sure.
As we move forward, there's increasingly more robotics and automation. And so that's where we see really those old software walls breaking down. And
There's a blend.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're invited to an RFP, we answer under labor management because that's what the buyers know and that's what the RFP calls for. But I mean, increasingly, I think of us as a really good data platform for inside the warehouse, and we have expressions of different apps or capabilities that we can offer, whether you're operations or frontline associates or engineering or, like you said, finance and HR, certainly growing consumers as well.
Yeah.
Do you guys model within your system the facility itself? Do you need to do that? Like the area of where people are? He's
yes.
smiling.
Yeah. So I would say I would answer that question in two ways. So one is we do it just via the data schema in the sense of we allow customers to take all these disparate data sets and kind of put them into the same language. And so I would say that's the first part of that is just getting it all into a common nomenclature so that if I'm a supervisor on the floor, one of the stories I always like to tell is we met this woman when we were touring one of the facilities and she had 4 screens or 3 screens in front of her. Each one of them was a different system. And we asked her, how do you know how John is doing in the warehouse today? And she goes, well, I look over here and I see what he did here. And then I go to this system and I see what he did here. And then I put
write it down on a whiteboard.
And it was like, how often do you do that? She goes, every hour. And we're like, oh my gosh. And so part of it is just getting all the data together and into an easy to use place. The second step, and we actually just launched our mapping capability where now we can actually track travel time, XYZ, and figure out, do you have your warehouse laid out appropriately? And the first question we got when we were building this was, can I simulate different layouts in my warehouse and figure out how much faster I can make it?
Like a digital twin?
Exactly. Yeah, it is funny. I mean, it's everywhere. But as soon as you build a capability, the first question you hear is, this is great, but can it do blank? And so, certainly.
But no, I think supply chains are a wash in need.
Yes.
Right? Like, and they're irreducibly complex because you're doing these repetitive things all the time, but you're in the real world. So variability that systems wise, like if we were building a finance system, it'd be so clean, right? But we deal in this world where the physical stuff can just happen.
Yep.
Right? I mean, like a forklift can drive into a wall. Like anything can happen at any time.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then it just completely adjusts everything.
Yep.
The flow of you can't use this bay door. We had an incident. You spilled something. Like all those things can happen.
Yep.
And in any kind of facility like that, but we're doing with international shipments, people can make mistakes all the time. Mm-hmm. What's fascinating from an overlap perspective, we deal far more on the logistics side than in the warehouse side, but we're constantly being asked in the same way, well, could you help us here?
Yep.
Because, we kind of do this kind of automated exception identification, like we're detecting exceptions based on what's going on out there. On top of things like visibility data or other kinds of data, we're trying to surface things that are going wrong, things that people are doing wrong.
Right.
Everybody's trying to do the right thing all the time, but people make mistakes. And so we surface those exceptions, and then sometimes we can automate the analysis of those things and get them back on track. And sometimes a human needs to be involved. But what's fascinating about all of these things, we did the same. I've traveled all over the world. I'm going to Germany on Sunday to meet with a major airline there who's headquartered in Frankfurt. And it's, you walk through all of these facilities. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to tour their cargo handling facility.
Yep.
And I love it. Every one of them are different.
Absolutely.
People thinks every warehouse operates the same. And like you were saying, two sides of the warehouse could operate very differently.
Totally.
Yeah.
And everyone does it slightly differently, and it's funny. They are like snowflakes in the sense you walk into everyone. There's a commonality, but then they all do something slightly differently. And for us, from a data perspective, it's like, okay, well, that's now slightly different. How do we figure that part out? And that's been. It feels like that's starting to. We've now seen what we feel like is the majority of the combinations. There's always new ones, but yeah, I mean, especially when you get into like kitting and value-added services work, where these 3PLs, especially those gift baskets you get, or one of our customers does like hot sauce, and I was like, well, I assume that they make this box of hot sauce with the 3 different hot sauces in it. Like, nope, we ship them all individually to the 3PL, who then boxes them up custom, whatever. And it's just all those different complex processes and unique processes that you never think about when the box shows up on your front porch. And seeing behind the scenes there, I'm like, how do you manage all of this? There's just,
No, I mean, we don't. Yeah, we always think that if we receive a thing, that had to be manufactured that way.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's a lot of intermediate work that goes on with manufactured goods to package them for distribution throughout the chain.
I think of the sheer cost. I mean, especially if you think about returns and exceptions and all the different
RMA.
handling and touching that happens to get a unit to your doorstep. It's crazy, right? I mean,
That it works at all.
that it works at all, that anyone's making money throughout the entire process. Yeah, I mean, especially if it goes through, like you said, humans make mistakes. If it goes through an exceptions path, just how manual and painstaking fixing that is. Yeah, I mean, it does.
When I talk to people in the supply chain, people that are in the industry, like doing work, right, that are running a warehouse or doing an airline or whatever else, and I say, do you know how much we spend as a world on logistics or supply chain each year, the moving of things around the world? I go, no. So, as a world, we spend $10 trillion a year moving things around the world. And that's more than we spend on construction globally. We spend about $8.5 trillion on construction.
Wow.
So supply chain, logistics, warehousing, inventory carrying, all that stuff is $10 trillion a year. It's the largest amount of money we spend on anything. We manufacture roughly 4 billion pallets a year, mostly wood, right? And we consume them.
Right.
And most of those wooden pallets are used a couple times, and they're
trashed
pulped and but it's just 380 million of those are plastic pallets of 4 billion.
Right.
So it's just we deal with this stuff. You guys see it in the warehouse. We experience it, from the outside, watching these things moving around. I've crawled through so many warehouses because we also were at one point monitoring facilities, and we do some of that here, like with IoT devices to make sure temperatures are right. I've crawled through many racks, like literally been in the racks, crawling around, and it's nice. It's grounding, especially if you're a software person. I still am. It's grounding. It's like physically grounding. It's gratifying, like the work we do. It just feels to me like it's just a very different kind of.
Much more tangible.
It is.
Like, I mean, I've been in data centers. I've been in the IT, sections with lots of offices, and you're like, oh, like this is kind of hard work. And then you go into a warehouse, and you're like,
no.
Yeah, especially like cold food storage.
Oh, yeah.
There for 10 hours, like, nah.
In a big thick jacket.
Yeah,
exactly.
Big jacket, moving a ton, lifting heavy things. I mean, that is, if we can, I love my office job, but I love also seeing if we can help those people even a little bit every day.
Right.
It makes it all worth it.
No, it does. And so what is so you talk about this data layer. So you guys first have to start with this kind of, we've got these existing systems with existing information, some whiteboards, and so you find gaps, right? Where, these systems don't have that information. So then what do you do with that? That's the foundational layer of data. I guess it's flowing in and out in near real time, right? Because, you've got those sorts of things.
As fast as SFTP cron jobs can get
exactly.
us
The industry loves their SFTP.
Yeah, it's EDI, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What is EDI? It's SFTP.
I give you a file.
It's sending flat files from.
And we have customers that are very high technology companies, and that's how the data is sent to us.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because it's the easiest thing to do.
Correct.
Absolutely.
It's like you guys literally run queues, like as in you are a cloud platform provider and you have queues. Can we do that? And they're like, no, but we can drop files into SFTP.
You know what would be faster for this project?
And they're like, no, because IT constrains them from using queues
Totally.
with external systems.
Yeah.
But they can SFTP.
Absolutely.
So it becomes the way, and we pull all that stuff into queues.
Yep. We just,
But yeah, so it's just funny. So you guys now have this data coming in, and that may be API driven, maybe mostly legacy integration with files and stuff. So that stuff's being aggregated, normalized. I guess you've evolved your schema as you were talking. Like over time, you learn more. We did the same thing on the shipment side. You get into edge cases that make you think differently about it, and you're like, oh, we've just discovered a new way of thinking about this thing, or expanding this model that now needs to have this and that.
Or getting a net new system on board, right? A new interface that we hadn't thought about or really historically had access to, certainly.
Right. So then you've got then you've got that. So your platform is pulling that in, multi-tenant type system.
Yeah,
okay.
multi-tenant SaaS.
And then what are you doing with that? So you talked about it at a high level. But
So we get those data feeds from customers, like you said, every 5 to 10 minutes. On the SFTP front, we knew we weren't going to be able to manage SFTP servers for every client. So we built a horizontally scalable SFTP server that all it does is translate SFTP commands to API calls behind the scenes. Best decision we've made, because people love that thing.
Helps
and
us on the security audit when we can promise that we don't run a SFTP server somewhere.
And so once the data's in, the first thing is we have to categorize it. So customers can come in, and every customer, the same way they run their warehouse differently, they want to view their warehouse differently, the way they think about their setup, right? And so for a 3PL, they want to view it by client. Most of them do. Whereas if you're a retailer or a brand, you may think about your business in terms of shoes, apparel, or one of our customers thinks about their business as stuff that goes on a rack, stuff that goes on a shelf. And so we let customers come in and configure that directly in the interface, and they can really then write rules in the business on the rule side to categorize all of those disparate data sources into that common schema effectively.
And I would say that's the marriage counseling aspect of our business, right? Yeah, I mean, every single facility we go in, people have different names or call it different things or think about the flow slightly differently. And so you're saying, I mean, a lot of it's just helping customers get their arms around what they have and getting them on the same page.
Sure. In the nomenclature they're used to.
100%, right? I mean, we've seen it from, folks will get confused if you call it pack because it's called repack here.
Yeah.
It's not sort, it's outsort here. Like even the simple things make it harder for, our typical user isn't super technical advanced, right? And so they're used to the way their operation runs, they're used to their nomenclature, and they're used to having data presented to them and, their vernacular.
And I think for us, then it goes into how do we present that data to the supervisors on the floor, the warehouse leaders that have to run a warehouse every day and ultimately get the units out the door in a way that helps them do their job more efficiently, and then ultimately coach employees and provide feedback to employees. And so what we do is we have purpose and opinionated dashboards for facility leaders, shift leaders, supervisors, managers that inside the warehouse that historically have been tools in our space. It's very Power BI or Tableau-like, where it's a blank canvas. You can come in, you can design the data however you want. And we found that, no, we're going to go spend time with all of the best operators in the industry that we can get our hands on and come out with a dashboard that we know the best in the class are using to run an effective warehouse. And so we often find one or two ideas or a nugget of idea from every customer, and we can bring all that together and provide those dashboards. That is certainly a different approach than a lot of our compadres in the space. And I
think it helps, though.
I think it is ultimately a help by forcing folks to focus on those key metrics that really do matter, that we know drive improvement. But everyone has their own metric, and where I use UPH, I use quantity, I use cases, and you have to be able to navigate those waters. But I think the opinionated approach and providing them those insights has really helped drive performance improvement. Something as simple as startup and shutdown time, down to utilization, making sure your folks are on task, they have enough work in front of them, all the way down to what is the performance of each process in my building. And as an engineering team, where should I focus? I've got 1,000 processes in my warehouse. What are the 10 that matter? And then helping drive folks towards that.
Yeah, I mean, the virtuous cycle, probably the biggest feedback loop we have in Takt is a manager engages with their employee, right? Hopefully that's done, not just off of anecdotal. I observed Alex for 15 minutes. It's done with not just that observation, but with Alex's historic performance as well. the reason it's important is we've done the research that shows engaged employees are significantly higher performing, stay at the company longer, and ultimately do more, right?
And there's a lot of churn. I mean, people will quit to go work in a warehouse across the street.
For 10 cents more,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And the people that have trained those people in that warehouse, in their operations that depend on that, they're going to have to ramp somebody else in to their process.
Totally.
So that's a challenge.
And I think I have a newfound respect for sort of the management task in those buildings as well. I mean, coaching those employees is, especially when nothing is keeping them there. They can go across the street to Amazon or UPS or whoever's across the street for, like you said, 25 cents an hour, $1 more an hour. And that's meaningful for them. And so you have to really do a lot to keep them there. And you also have a lot of folks who are stepping into management positions who've never managed anyone before. And when I was a first-time manager, I would say I probably wasn't very good at it. And
it's not always comfortable conversations, right? Yeah. I mean, to go give feedback of things that Alex can improve on. If I'm a new manager, it's really hard to have that conversation, especially because most of the workforce that are in there are probably older than me, right? As a manager, and so I mean, we're at some point in time just trying to lower the barrier to entry and make sure that folks are or can have those very effective and data-driven conversations.
It was the first place we tried. We actually have put in everyone has an AI strategy these days, but it's the first place that we actually saw good returns on some of the generative AI stuff. Was how can we help? The first thing when we launched observations in the product was manager said, "Hey, you're adding too much work for me. This is a lot of work to document it, write a well thought out, feedback. I've got a couple bullet points that I want to coach the employee on. Why do I have to go to type in the same metrics that you guys already know about this employee's performance?" And so we said, well, okay, we can probably start to help you with that. And now that's evolved into our coaching tool that if you type in your bullet points, your notes effectively from observing the employee, we know what their past performance is. We know what their past startup and shutdown times are, et cetera, et cetera. We can fill in a lot of that data-driven part of the conversation so that you walk away with a well-structured coaching conversation for an employee that's
neat.
Actionable, and an employee can actually come back in 2 weeks and say, did I do it?
I like that a lot because it is using all the stuff around generative AI for like what it's actually supposed to be good at, as opposed to just be like, hey, we got our chat bot. There it
Correct.
is. Like, that's awesome. Yeah.
It does also, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. So if I get it, if I'm, understanding what you're doing around coaching, right? You guys are your tool is kind of setting up like individual coaching sessions in a way that's like utilizing all the data that you guys are pulling in, but then saying like, okay, here's how this employee can specifically improve, and sort of like diffuse some of the tension around that, because it's like, all right, let's talk about what our platform is saying is going on here and figure out a way forward, right?
Yeah, and historically I've talked about our platform is there's two major feedback loops. There's the employee feedback loop where, hey, this process is, as a company or as a facility as a whole, this process is performing well, and this employee has some room for improvement, or this employee is crushing it. How do I make sure I engage with that employee and provide either the, hey, you're doing a really good job, or, hey, here's some areas of opportunity, and here's a couple notes to improve upon, so that they stay at the company, earn that incentive pay, whatever it may be. The second is the engineering feedback loop. And so, hey, the whole cohort of the warehouse is 60% efficient. That's probably not a individual issue at that point. That's either a training issue, a process design issue, an equipment issue, whatever it may be. And so I think by combining those two feedback loops, the goal is to ultimately increase performance in the warehouse and help them do more. And so I think those are the two primary paths when we first started the product. And that's how people today are using the tool to drive that at day-to-day performance.
And I think, it's the new buzzword is agents and agentifying the platform. And I think that's where the opportunity is for us as well. Right? There's beyond those two, there's so many more feedback loops where we can save time or improve the decision making because we have all the data. We have it hopefully in near real time, again, depending on the SFTP or whatever else. But part of what we need to do is direct you to take the right action or make a better informed decision. And that's where I think we've got a ton of opportunity for operations, for finance, for engineering. And so, all these other roles that struggle to make these timely decisions because it is hard to get to the data. It is hard to pull it out of the system. It's hard to interpret it. I think that's where we can also lower some of these barrier to entries that have made optimizing your warehouse really hard.
That's the way we approached agents, which was several years ago now, it's like 2.5 years ago,
Yeah.
we kept having customers need us to actually look at things a little differently
Yep.
for them and their shipments and the way they do things. If we're shipping into a certain warehouse in a certain country, it might not have LTE Cat-M, which means you can't actually communicate there, but the warehouse has Wi-Fi. And so if we had that sensor, we could program the Wi-Fi access, access point credentials in that sensor
Yep.
for shipments going to that country's warehouse. But you have to know that.
Yep.
Well, the order system knows that. We know that. But then you have this okay, well, a shipment appears and that's that destination. Customers, they had people looking at this and going, I need to go update the profile of that sensor so that it goes to this warehouse.
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing is building this agent system that we named the Cargo Sense Intelligence Agency, CIA.
Nice. I see what you did.
Yeah, but these agents they subscribe on an organizational basis, right? So in a multi-tenant system, and the agents are basically event stream processors.
Mm-hmm.
So they're handling event streams, looking for certain patterns, and then like that as an example, and you can concretely code these things. This is not a low code, and we code it, right? But these run in a highly available, tens of thousands of these things concurrently running all the time. Basically, every shipment gets agents, and we're going to be doing 2.5 million shipments this year. So you'd imagine lots of agents. And so, but they're really good at focused analysis of a certain set of events. As long as you guys can generate these events, you can build things that detect those patterns. It's hard to do that in a UI, but it's easy to do that. And then these output what, right? So, and that's the thing, is it's really nice that these agents can then do anything in our system. They can raise exceptions. They can handle exceptions. Like one agent raises an exception, another agent handles that exception.
Yeah.
And for that one customer, it's like, when this happens in this warehouse, email this person.
Yep.
A lot of things that would just be really hard to put together from a product standpoint that would be totally user serviceable or whatever, right? And it's very one-off little bits that it's just you can't make a feature and then deploy that on the platform, and then all the rest of your customer base just goes, "What's that?" And you're well, don't worry about it. It's not for you. So many of those things.
Feature flag. You have 1,000 feature flags that you can turn on and off.
Yeah. Hey, go there. I don't see that in my UI.
Hold on a second.
Refresh. This was good. So we've all done that too. But once we had this agent thing, all that went away. We stopped having to do that.
Yep.
A lot of these things aren't things that, the best system in the world, to me, or the best interface in the world is the one you don't see, right? Mm-hmm. And so if these agents can actually help push people or pull people into something at the time they need to do that, you solve problem. It never raises to it. It never raises to an issue. You're catching it early.
Yeah, I think the one that is, so for us, the 3-year journey, the first 1.5, 2 years of it was building the data system for us.
Same.
And it was, okay, we know we're not just going to solve for the problem that's in front of us. We need to make this more generic. And one of the biggest challenges customers have is just organizing their data. They've got all these different sources. So we built the rules engine so that customers can, whether you're an IE or even a warehouse operations manager, you can manage these rules so that it categorizes your data. That was job one. Now we know, now we've modeled your data. Now we can do all these cool events. And so for us, the one I think that we're excited about, we've started to work on, is I know where what your employees are good at. And now I know we have labor planning, so I know where your quantity is going to be, and I know what sort of your needs are around the warehouse. Well, why do I have to have a manager to log into a tool, view where I need labor in the building right now, and then get on the radio and call some people? That's something we should be able to do in the platform. And I think for us, I think labor moves throughout the day, especially optimizing that, because you can't do it too much, because then you have people walking around the warehouse all day. But getting that right amount to optimize your output, there's no reason why our platform with the data we get can't do that automatically for you throughout the day.
Right.
Have your warehouse supervisors focused on issues. Optimizing your labor throughout the day, I think, is going to be something that for us will be the first thing that we're charging towards automating.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So nerd question.
Yeah.
What did you guys build your platform on?
Yeah. So do you want the full evolution or do you want
No,
where we are now?
where are we
Nerd
now?
answer.
No, you don't need that.
Cool. Because so starting in PHP. No,
Yeah,
the,
I understand.
no, so today we're totally in the cloud, on Google Cloud. Having worked at a cloud vendor, I never want to run infrastructure again.
Agreed.
And so we're on Google Cloud. We're entirely using their managed services for everything.
we do the same.
I don't have a single infrastructure engineer on my team.
Right. We have
Everyone's
one.
a software developer.
Basically running all of our, doing all our Kubernetes configurations.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a little hardware too. That
Yeah.
makes,
Yeah.
it's a little bit harder.
Exactly.
when you
Type
mix
more
that
integration
in.
there. And so, so then all of our backend is a typical microservice architecture. We use Go. It's been great for us, especially
Yeah.
on the data processing side.
No, it's
And
fantastic. Language.
security side, it's been great. We deploy super minimal footprint to the cloud ultimately in our containers, and that just makes my security life really easy.
Yep.
Usually, when we start talking to the security security teams at our customers, they're like, "We're good." And then our
Such a fortunate place
yeah,
to be.
no, it's
No, we have the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we're using Elixir
Yeah.
for everything, but it's,
Elixir's fascinating with the process per request.
Yes.
I can nerd out all day about that.
I know. So, our CTO lives here in this area, so we'll get you guys together at some point to do that. But so it's Go basically for the back end. And is that also are you heavy JavaScript on the front? I'm totally nerding.
No,
at
yeah.
this point.
So one of the things that we decided very early on was that, as you all know, warehouse connectivity is not the greatest.
Right.
So we want to try to load as much of the application to the user once.
Interesting.
And so that we only load the data coming back and forth throughout the day, and as basically as minimal as we can. And so our web apps are heavy, single page front end web apps, and so those are loaded once, and now the user has.
So it's just API calls.
Our entire backend is entire API, and our API is all of our applications that we build are the same API that our customers have access to.
Sure.
And so that has been the best investment we ever made because one
we
day
had
we just turned
exactly
it
the
on.
same architecture. We use GraphQL
Yep.
as that. We actually ended up writing the GraphQL library for Elixir. So it's called Absinthe. It came out of our company
Yeah, that's
because we
awesome.
need it, and like New York Times uses it. Like every,
that's awesome.
I know it's
He
just
charged
one of those
service
open
fees.
source
He
things.
put it behind a paywall.
Yeah, that's right. That's
You
what
must
we did.
log in. Oh,
Yeah,
You've made 3 queries this month. Sorry. The fourth is
you need to upgrade your
yeah,
service
exactly,
level. Yeah.
exactly.
No, but it's it's a good. And so our whole thing is a big API.
Yep.
And then our UI is built on top of that API. We happen to have an intermediate service that is consuming the GraphQL and turning that in with LiveView to HTML. But that's just the architecture we chose. But then we have other services that talk to that. And because it's the same API, it makes it really consistent.
Yeah.
Right. And you surface what everyone can use. It's not some proprietary thing.
Yeah.
Do you allow others to build on top of the API, or is
Almost
it?
never do they.
Yeah.
Could we? Yes.
Yep.
Could people? Yes. Usually they'll go, what's the easiest thing we can do?
Right.
We don't mind doing this, but we usually do the integration.
Yep.
They don't. Rarely do we get anybody from their IT group doing anything other than maybe giving us files.
Yeah.
Like everything
us.
else is ours. If they want file data, we're like, in what format? How do you want it?
Totally.
Do you want an email to you? Like, it's like literally like that. And, we have sophisticated customers that want to do stuff like we put in a relational database, they sweep the database into their cloud infrastructure. We have others that want us to be able to just output data in certain forms to them and get it pushed to them so that they archive it. But they're not operationalizing it, but they're just archiving it so that they have a copy of the
Just
data.
in case. Saving for a rainy day.
Well, it's more like they have to, because of regulatory reasons,
so
have
more
a copy of this
compliance for-
data.
If you're doing
It's all
pharmacy-
that.
pharmaceuticals, yeah.
So we do a lot with that, pharmaceuticals, and we want them to. We're like, have copies of this data. We're doing our best efforts to make sure that the data is there. But
And we have the opposite problem. Our customers throw away warehouse data after 3 months. And so they come to us because we keep it. And so, we have a customer right now. I have 2 years of performance data down to the individual scan in their warehouse. They don't. They have it on a tape drive somewhere, but
their AS400.
pretty much,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's pretty amazing that like 3 months. Once 3 months goes by, they lose total. They have aggregates of aggregates, right?
Well, they,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, they put it in a spreadsheet to go reflect on, previous season and year performance. But yeah, it is funny that maybe the first question we always get asked is like, how long do you keep my data? Like, until you tell us to delete it. I assume you're going to look at maybe last season, this season, last year, this year, last 4 years, that type of thing. So I mean,
Have you guys looked at anything where you do any kind of aggregate analytics across?
Yes, and so that we did a white paper about a year and a half ago that was around the employee engagement. That was our first, I would say, step in that direction. We get a lot of customers that say like, "Hey, can you help me compare my picking process across, compared to the industry benchmark?" And I think we'll get there someday.
Yeah.
I think we talked before about how customers do everything slightly differently. So comparing apples to apples is really hard.
Yeah.
I think those will still be bespoke, sort of like industry reports that we do, and I think we're planning on doing more of those this year.
We've talked about like scorecards. I mean, like the Dora was an awesome project, obviously got bought up by Google, but they had a great one for DevOps where they would give you kind of your stack ranking scale to say you should be doing this many deployments, this many outages, this availability. And I think we have that opportunity, and maybe using some of our metrics. We try to normalize them, right? And try.
We have the same problem. Every shipment is different.
Yep.
Like literally every single shipment, even if you're shipping from the same origin, same destination the next day, right? Because anything can happen on that. So we break shipments down into a very, very small pieces, right? Legs and milestones and, different types of transits and things like that. We can compare those. So there's like internal things you can do aggregate analysis on, like from this facility to that facility. We can compare that.
Yep.
But it's very hard, even if, but that internal analysis can be actually really good.
Yep.
Totally.
So, the picking process, you might be able to have small, consistent processes that you can compare across different things, right? But it's,
I was gonna say customers ask us all the time, what is the average number of touches it takes for a best in class operation to get a unit from the shelf out the door? And you see customers that do it in 3 or 4, and then you see customers it takes 8 or 9. And I think that would be our analogous version of that.
Yeah. Like we can do this because we can break that down into this sub process.
Totally.
But everyone has to do this sub process. So in aggregate, name your metric.
Yep.
How many touches is it? Things like that. Do you guys bring in real time location data as well of the people physically moving or? This is a personal interest.
No. I would love to. Okay. The pushback historically has been that's expensive. The track, as you all know, the trackers are expensive to do and maintain and keep up to date. I mean, if you look at they have these, everyone basically has an Android phone now in the warehouse. That's what the scanners are.
Sure.
And so we've looked at doing some of that location data, but in order to do indoor mapping, you really need to have the indoor location sensors to figure out where somebody is. I know you can do all sorts of like Wi-Fi fun stuff.
We looked at cameras as well, like plugging into CCTV. I mean,
I think a lot of those solutions though they're going to be really expensive for the output of if you're scanning regularly, I know where you are. And you can probably, is that good enough to get to where you need to be? There's certainly going to be applications where no, it's not.
We've also heard the pushback that, it feels slightly more invasive, right? To have the wearable, track the wearable, or track on CCTV or something else like that. We've definitely heard some pushback.
I think the one that I'm most excited about that I do see us doing at some point in the future is it's kind of the same technology they put in retail stores where I know who walked into an area and those more aggregate metrics, because there's a lot of areas in a warehouse that there are no scans. So someone may enter, I may know someone's generally there, but I don't, like, for example, receiving. Oftentimes when you unload a truck, nothing's scanned. It's never actually, as you all know, it's not receipt until someone comes along later and takes the staging lanes and actually processes those.
Palletizes it, receives it in inventory.
And so one of the things I think that as these badges get more intelligent, they put more smarts in the badges, could we put a proximity scanner in the ceiling that says, I at least know who entered and left this area? And what's funny is one of our customers already does this. You know what they do it for?
No.
Fire and emergencies in the warehouse. So that they know who entered and left.
Yeah.
And
safety.
So for safety. And so I said, well, why don't you have that by your dock door? You could do the same thing. He's like, well, that's really expensive. I'm like, but you already did it. Anyway, so I think that would be probably the first step. I think my big challenge with the cameras, there's great companies that do awesome things and really cool things once you have that camera data.
Sure.
But that setup and that, I always call that the time to awesome there is so long. And our customers, they need to see improvement much faster than that, at least what we've seen. And so I think we'll get there. Maybe at some point.
What do you think would be a good price for technology that would allow you to do precise three-dimensional location moving through a facility of, say, 1,000 meters?
Asking for a friend. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I would flip the question back and say, what is the value I'm going to drive from that? Because that's, from what we've seen, is the cost is one thing, but if you can map the ROI, obviously, I know this is simple.
Okay, so here's the question also. Because you guys know this, how often do people put things in the wrong place in a racking system?
Frequently.
Which
and what is the ramifications of that?
Well, and we see that. Yeah, so we see that indirectly today, and so maybe we'll speak broadly about exceptions in the warehouse.
Sure.
Today, exceptions are very hard to track, and or they're even harder to diagnose what caused it. And a lot because that data doesn't exist. Because
you see like the people trying to do things to fix it, but you don't see how it
correct
how it got messed up in the
so
first place.
You'll see two things today. And they're not related. You will see somebody who let's say ordered something online. They assembled my order. The packer says, "I only have 5 of the 6 items." Triggers an exception. It typically goes into a fix area, which means somebody else has to go troubleshoot and fix that issue. That time is all what's called indirect time. So that person is just not tracked per unit. They have to go figure out all these issues, and it takes them however long it takes them to figure it out. That's one area, but you never tie back, okay, the person fixes it and they ship the unit. Oftentimes there's no data connection between those two things. So you never know.
Those two events.
Exactly.
Sometimes you have customer order, but that's a well-run operation, or well-run, not operation. That's a well-set-up data structure from a customer. That's very few and far between. The other thing you see is what are called like skip picks, where someone goes to pick an item, it's not there, and that will trigger a cycle counter, somebody else, to come back along and go check to make sure that they were right. And some places actually do that twice before they will actually trigger a replenishment or trigger a troubleshooting or whatever. And so I think for us, we see some of that data in the WMS. There's not a systemic thing today that lets us connect the two.
Totally.
And so this is where the same way we are doing indirect tracking, where folks can track time that's not outside of that, we had to go build that solution. It's a kiosk. It's also an app on their scanner to collect that data, because it's data that just didn't exist. I think we're getting more and more retail and e-commerce customers saying, can you help me not only track those quality issues, but also help me root cause them. And I think that's going to be sort of the next, one of our next things to go.
We're going to be working together more closely.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the put away is one thing, but to me, I mean, a shipment miss is, the root of all, right?
And also inbound, right?
100%.
Truck doesn't show up.
Or it does,
and you don't know where
did you get everything in your order?
On the manifest,
right? Yeah. So it's reconciliation.
Yep.
We had so many people that said we have to do a 4-way reconciliation. How do you help us do that?
Yep.
They have to reconcile it against the PO. They have to make sure that the packing list, you got everything in that packing list and that everything is there.
Yep.
So that's the first thing you do.
Yep.
You haven't inbounded anything.
Yep.
You're just somebody's looking at the packing list. They're looking at what's
eyeballing
there.
it to then
and they're
say,
saying this looks like something. But they do. They count units.
And they print it out, and they're like checking stuff off.
Exactly on the piece of paper.
Even if they did their job perfect, I assume they make mistakes because they're human.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So we just keep getting, because as much as we are part of this logistics process, it ends up in a warehouse at some point.
Yep.
And we are asked a lot, how can we help in this kind of...
because we go right up to that boundary, and then it's like, okay, well, the next thing is this. And it's like, well, we don't have any
Let me
model
ask
for
you,
that.
how much of because when we came to the market, it was so clear there was so much investment, let's call it outside the 4 walls.
Yeah.
On the freight tech side, on the logistics and shipping side. And then it just seemed like nobody was focused on the inside of the 4 walls of the warehouse. So now that you guys track all of the movements of goods and all that kind of stuff outside the warehouse, how is the warehouse truly just dark for you all in terms of the data?
Cool. Yeah.
It is. And it's because there's no systematic way of getting measurement. So our mission statement, as stated, is simplify supply chain operations through measurement, automation, and collaboration. That's it. We need measurement so that we can automate, and you do not want to automate without data you trust. Right?
True.
So then the collaboration is, who do you connect when things go wrong? Because our whole focus is exception management, right?
Yep.
And trying to detect.
Right.
So in order to detect exceptions, you need to see everything.
Totally.
But once it enters a warehouse, and there's all kinds of constraints. So we have a constraint system in our system. You guys we have these active constraints where you're getting sensors that are telling you things like temperature, humidity, like that kind of stuff is easy. But what about do not rack? Like you can receive things that should not be racked.
Yep.
You know, they should stay on the floor, especially in 3PL warehouses. Do not rack these pallets. And somebody racks one.
Yep.
That's an exception. Because it puts their pallet at risk. It puts whatever their product is. Do not stack. Same kind of thing. Do not stack.
Totally.
So they put the little cones on top of there, right?
Yeah,
But I mean,
seen that.
it's all these low tech ways of doing things. But the how do we detect those things? How do we measure those things?
So how much would you pay for a system that allowed you to detect all those events?
Well, my point is, if there was a system that had those events, we could operationalize those with exceptions and actually drive that.
Well, I mean, from our side, right? I mean, we've had a customer that said, "Hey, can you cordon off an area in the warehouse? Just draw a box around it and say, what is my picking performance here?" I would use the same analogy with that example and say, well, I know what type of good this person's handling because we have our rules engine, so I know exactly how to categorize it. If we put constraints, well, now I know which locations based on the Z-axis you can put this in. If it's not a Z0, trigger an alert, right?
Right.
Because if you put this on Z10 or 10 feet up in the air, I know that that's not supposed to go there. I can trigger an alert. And so that exact example, now that we have all the data, we've normalized the WMS out for what we need, not in general. That does a lot more than what we do. But we've now normalized that out. Now we have this general schema of events that can look across systems and do exactly those things. And that's where we've had customers now pull us out of this labor management box and into
warehouse operations in general.
Correct.
Right.
And so I think,
and it seems like that's what you're doing, right?
Yep.
Labor is a necessary component for warehouse operations, but there's other things that factor into warehouse operations or optimization.
Yeah, and a customer came and asked us the other day and said, "How much does it cost me to ship an order?" Or, "Hey, I'm seeing a bunch of returns. Why am I seeing these returns?" Well, it's not a labor management system,
right?
But it's something we can absolutely do.
You have a mission of simplify warehouse operations through measurement, automation, collaboration.
Yeah,
Seems like a lot of overlap.
No, it's a different noun in there. We're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's fine. But it's just it's funny because they are black holes to us, right? Things go in, they come out. Usually that warehouse is a stop point for something else in a supply chain sense.
Yeah, right.
If they're an inventory, if they're a 3PL warehouse, sometimes it's just literally in there for a day or two, customs hold, and then it's released.
Yeah, cross-docking.
And so, or just hold import type things. So we do a lot of international stuff. So they'll customs hold something. Once it's released, they ship it on. Sometimes the customer is just like, hold on to that for a couple of days before you ship it. So you can't really judge them based on the amount of we have very little data. And so we can add constraints like it can't dwell in this warehouse for more than a period of time. We have no idea where it is in that warehouse.
Right. Yep.
But it seems like when you talked about robotic systems.
Yeah.
And there's jukeboxing systems and things like that. But I mean, as in forklift operating robots. So some of our customers have these fully autonomous warehouses that offload, build pallets out, bring them out, drop them, and then a human comes in, picks them up. But the racks are all driven by these robots.
Yep.
And why are they doing that? Why are they making that investment in those robotic systems from your perspective? Because you're dealing with the labor side. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys, why you hear customers looking towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the first and foremost is just labor availability, in the region that they're in. Like you said and called out, if you see a warehouse, there's probably 5 around you, and then you're in an arms race to go compete for the same talent and pay them roughly around the same rate. So certainly labor availability comes into play. But I think there's an aspect of reliability that comes in, right?
That's what I was asking.
I think it's also a density. I mean, with the rise of goods to person, ASRS systems, AutoStore, Ocado, Exotech, there's a ton of them now. You can run an e-commerce operation with tons of SKUs out of a
binning.
Yeah, out of a 200,000 square foot warehouse that would have taken 1 million square feet.
No,
just
I
10 years
totally
ago.
understand that from the binning perspectives,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about palletized goods.
Yep.
Okay.
There's much more expensive robotic systems than
gray
the
orange.
binning
Totally.
systems. Yeah. And it's those things. I think the reliability thing, in other words, people misplacing pallets
Yep.
and walking
And
up
get
and
sick
down.
and don't show up. And
Yeah. Well, that, but I mean, robotic systems aren't cheap.
yeah, correct.
So, you have to, you could overpay an employee to keep them there.
Yep.
And it's vastly cheaper than getting a robotic system. So it can't just be around labor costs.
Yep.
Because it takes you a long time to earn back that labor cost to put in a robotic system. Totally understand about the warehouse density issue. And we've been in places where, like we were at an Airbus helicopter facility where they had a big jukeboxing system. It was massive. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
These things were just dropping out, right? Continuously. It's just like gorgeous stuff. And I totally understand why you're doing that with smaller parts. Then they had the rest of their warehouse were these massive crates of helicopter parts that looked like the thing at the end of Indiana Jones where they put because they're all wooden crates.
Yeah.
You're right.
And they go back like a half a mile. It was the biggest warehouse I've ever seen. And it was just, and they have many of those because they have a 24-hour window of having, if they have an AOG event, aircraft on ground, they have to get parts of that aircraft within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world.
Yep.
So they have these
Keep
points.
it all on hand, ready
They
to
have
go.
to. I mean, helicopter blades.
Yep.
Like, think about it. Like they had cranes that held the blades for helicopters, all of them.
Yep.
The different sizes. Wow. Yeah, engines, like all of these things. It's just, but the ability of getting back down to that measurement, we lack the measurement data upon which we could actually do any type of analysis in our agent system to be able to determine that some constraint that a customer had. And if I was going through a warehouse, if my stuff was shipping through a 3PL warehouse, and I have something like a do not rack, right, constraint, and that comes through that warehouse, there's no way for me to get data to say whether this is what you were saying, but if you could at least measure and say, oh, this thing's being racked right now, and that event could come out of that warehouse, that is definitely something that from a customer perspective, from a shipper's perspective, moving through there, they would want to say like, no. Well, first, the person that's there, you want to make sure they're probably not realizing they're doing something wrong. Like they're not trying to be nefarious.
Right.
They're just making a mistake. For whatever reason, lack of documentation, process control, any of those kinds of things. That person, first and foremost, if they were told should not be racked, they would just put it back.
Right.
Like they're not, again, they're not just trying to be a jerk, right?
Right.
If the warehouse is actually doing bad things because they want to clear out the space and they're going to rack the stuff even though it says do not rack and they're doing that, that's a whole different world, but you're never going to get measurement on that warehouse to begin with. So,
Totally.
But there doesn't seem to be a good technology to do this. There's ultra wideband, there's various things like that. The problem with ultra wideband is you have to grid the entire thing at like 20 meter, every 20 meters you have one of these points. You have to make sure those batteries, it's just the infrastructure is expensive
And
to
fiddly.
maintain.
And fiddly.
And fiddly, and you've got that. But if there was a way of getting reliable measurement of this pallet's in this particular slot right now, that's like where it was, that is data that effectively is what the WMS thinks it is.
Right.
Do you guys ever send data back to things like WMSs, or are you just pulling data out?
Today, we just pull it out. I think in the future, to me, today there's the WMS, there's the WES, the execution system. It feels like the WMS market has moved into that WES space and is taking on more of that functionality. But if we're able to, and maybe bridge this over to robotics, if you only view a part of the warehouse, you can only make only so good decisions.
Right.
Whereas you're going to need complete visibility, and our approach there has always been let's go focus on getting that complete visibility, and then there's so many things we can do with that information. So for us, for example, the WMSs, who should I assign this task to? Well, I know who's currently has the least in their queue, but why do they have least in their queue? Maybe they're unutilized, maybe they're not as efficient, right? How can we help make smarter utilization and task assignment decisions? How can we, optimize some of these processes? Are you sending stuff down the right lane? Maybe lane A is performing more efficiently than lane B, so you should actually send 70% of quantity down that lane and 30% down this lane. And so I think where we see ourselves going over the course of 5 or so years is going to be down that path. Is how do we then help other systems in the warehouse make smarter decisions?
Right.
And that's especially important with robotics. Most of robotics integrations with WMSs is assign task, do task, and then report back. There's so much that happens along the way. And so you talked before about how these companies are making huge investments in automation. And when they're not seeing that return,
right,
their first response is go back to the vendor and said, you promised me this. And the vendor's going to say, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yep.
Your upstream process is actually not functioning the way it should be, or you're diverting goods around the robotics, which is a common thing. And so now we see, I think we are moving into that space to say, how can we help you rationalize your labor and your robotics so that if you make an AMR investment and you're paying a RAS model where you're paying monthly for those robotics, they're all the time. Every minute, whether your warehouse is open or not, you're paying something for that robot. How can we help you get the most out of it and organize your labor in a way that ensures you get the most of throughput through that robot, both upstream and downstream? And I think balancing your labor across robotics and across the different sides of robotics is going to become the key aspect to getting the most out of those. A robotics vendor has very nice dashboards for how their robots are performing, and they look great, but they lack a lot of the context of the rest of the warehouse.
Yeah, they don't have any.
Right. I just it doesn't make sense for those vendors to go in and say, well, I'm going to be an LM tool as well, or I'm going to go integrate with all these other
for
systems.
your entire thing. Yeah.
I build robots and they're really good robots, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And so I think for us, the space is going to be how do we bring all that together, build that brain in the warehouse, and then help them make better decisions as an operation, and help operations also own those robotics and own some of those other systems.
And benefit.
Right.
You measure the benefit of it. Right.
Exactly. And so that's where we're really excited. And I think, that's what we're working on right now. And so we're really excited about where that's going. But I think over the fullness of time, warehouse execution systems will probably move into the WMS as we think of them today. And then I think this new market will emerge of whether it's warehouse intelligence or warehouse orchestration. I think the market's still figuring that out. But
we'll let Gartner fight for what they want to name it.
Yeah.
I'm with you. We'll figure it out and we'll tell them.
Figure it out together.
We'll let the customers tell us what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of high level, like in 2020, like in this year, in 2025, like kind of tactically. I know you just launched the facility mapping thing. What else do you kind of have like front burner coming up, that your existing customers, or you have any like market expansions that you're looking at this year?
Yeah, I mean, from a feature standpoint, you saw we did certainly happy about the facility mapping that launched this month. Like we were talking about, I think the getting deeper into the robotics tracking is an imperative for us and our customers as more and more facilities are becoming maybe not quite fully automated, but moving in that direction.
Certainly collaborative.
And increasingly so. I really think the overarching and overwhelming thing we hear from our customers are not, hey, there's a better dashboard for this, but I have so little time to focus on what's happening. Can you just tell me what's going on, what to do, what to focus on, and ultimately what intervention I should be taking from the data that you all already have on site? That ask for directed actions is probably the loudest ask we hear consistently.
Yep.
And so that certainly from a product standpoint, I've probably got 2 years of roadmap for Alex to get done in 1 year. So we're going to be hard charging for that.
I also think it's just like making the data more available. I mean, everyone thinks that you have to give the data to the manager, then go talk to the employee. Most of these, the employees are just like us. They want to look at how they're doing, and they will make adjustments when they see how they're doing. And
they're not trying to do typically the wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean, and especially as we move to incentive pay and some of these things, like I want to do well because it puts more money in my pocket, and I would do the same thing with my bonus structure or whatever in the corporate world. And so.
That's a great point. And I was
going to say, so we're one of the things we're launching is Takt TV. It is literally a purpose-built app to go on TVs in the warehouse that know where they are in the warehouse and show the right information, dynamically update, switch between different screens, and show you the key metrics for the different folks in the warehouse based on what they're doing. That has been, ironically, one of the largest asks. All these people have these big TVs. What ends up running on them is the HR slideshow about the upcoming pizza party. Which is good, but there's probably some good information that should go on there too. I think our virtual kiosk, which is tracking all those tasks that don't exist in the WMS, housekeeping, supply running, box building, all those things that have to happen for a warehouse to run, but exist in the ether in most warehouses.
Right.
And so making that more prevalent, we've automated the heck out of that so that we try to reduce as much administrative overhead. So there's no need to clock out. We know when you clocked out because we saw you scanning in another department. We'll just close your task, right? Some of those types of things, I think I've been continuing to refine those and get those better because we know the more data we go get, the smarter we get. So I think getting all that data, robotics, visibility is sort of the first half of this year. I think if I look at the fullness of this year, it's going to be, it really feels like in our testing that the LLMs are at a spot now where we can actually feed it some time series data and get some meaningful results, not just made up numbers that it used to do. Still, I think we've really stayed close to that over the time because we know as a facility leader, we have so much data. Where do you start? How can we synthesize all of your performance for a 1 million square foot facility for the last week and tell you specifically what to focus on? The LLMs are now at a point where they can do that. And so we're working on something, I think, right now that we're really excited about, and I think we'll streamline a lot of the decision making for some of those folks. And then we ultimately want to get to, I think, over the next couple of years, to some of those automated decisions, like we talked about labor moves. Yeah. I think those are the things that thematically lay out the next probably year or 2 years for us.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we're a small, scrappy, still growing startup. You know, we're 12 people full time now, and I think we'll just about double before the end of the year if we can close a couple more of these that we have late stage, and then so we're starting to ramp some of the customers that
we found a really good sweet spot with 3PLs, and so we're continuing to
We
invest
found
in
the
things.
opposite.
Really?
Oh, we've
Well, maybe we should compare.
Let's compare notes.
no. It's that if you think about it, when you book something through a 3PL, the 3PL's job is not just booking it.
Yep.
It's to make sure it happens. What do they say? 80% of the work is in the planning. 20% is in the execution. From the customer side, 80% is the execution, and 20% was the planning. They aren't doing the planning. That's what the 3PL is doing, and that's all the work. And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to book flights and to book cargo on there and make sure that you've got that. And if something gets rebooked, to rebook it. But then on the execution side, making sure that everything's going according to plan, 3PLs just kind of expect it to go according to plan. No one's watching anything. No 3PL watches what happens when shipments ship.
Yep.
There aren't people that are just like, oh, this thing is at this airport, or it's not getting to the airport in time.
Yep.
Nobody does that. What they do is they're interrupt driven. They're like, this thing arrived, or this thing is not going to make the flight. Like it hasn't arrived yet. And they'll get a message from like the airline.
Yeah.
And then, somebody may take action, they make calls, but it's all being driven from external notification.
But inside their facilities, different story.
I was going to say, inside the warehouse, they kind of have the opposite problem where brands or retailers will give them a forecast and they'll say, hey, I'm going to ship 1 million units this month. And then they get 2 million orders. Right. And so I think for a 3PL inside the warehouse, to be able to read and react to those situations in real time has historically been really hard because you have a customer WMS that you only have certain access to. You've got your own labor that you have to try to balance because you can't have too much because then you're not going to make any money. But you also have to have the right amount of labor available and read and react to some of these more dynamic situations. Good example. We had a customer, e-commerce brand doing consistent shipping for months, if not years, at the same level, ran their first sale ever. Well, guess what happened as soon as you run a huge sale that clears out a bunch of inventory? Your returns go through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
And the forecast didn't have that in there. And so they had to read and react, and they had to somehow process all of these pallets sitting on a dock and get them back into inventory so the brand could resell them. And I think inside the warehouse, it's for them, the data challenge and having a data advantage is ultimately going to equates to margin for them. And so that's where we've really seen a lot of wins with, especially multi-client 3PLs that have 10, 20, if
I think
hundreds.
3PLs as warehouse operators are different than 3PLs as logistics 3PLs.
Yeah.
Totally.
And they can do both.
They can do both.
Those warehouses bring cargo in and out. They're building out aircraft pallets, all that kind of stuff. And the back part of their warehouse is a bunch of inventoried stuff, and they're doing those direct to consumer shipments out of those things. They do both. Yeah.
I was just thinking about, we have a 3PL customer who's paid, unfortunately, several million in fines, right? Because they have to maintain a very strict chain of custody for high value goods. And so that seems like it would be a perfect fit to say, hey, we didn't actually ship the pallet. It's whatever they mark in their WMS, lost in warehouse or not in location. Like that would be a perfect use case.
Do you guys see, I mean, within the warehouses that you guys are in, do you see people repalletizing like upon receipt?
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time.
And then they flip the other way. So if they're doing an outbound, they're using wooded or some kind of some kind of low cost outbound pallet.
Yep.
If they're shipping pallets out.
If they're shipping pallets, yeah.
But on delivery, they repalletize.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
correct. I'd say most
I
of
mean,
the-
especially if stuff comes in on like a Shep pallet, you have to,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Because you
Yeah.
can't rack those.
Yeah, breakdown case, put on
Right.
conveyors, send over to a prep station, put it away.
Right.
Pick either pick case or pick units, but then you're gonna resort it, repackage it.
Are most of those pallets inside the warehouses plastic?
No.
Mostly wood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mostly splintered wood. That
Yeah.
Well, the reason and that's the reason, right? For example, a lot of Walmart DCs are going to purely plastic
Yep.
inside to save the racking systems.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because the nails and stuff like that and the danger of that.
Yep.
And they repalletize everything that gets delivered.
Yeah.
So
I think-
everything comes in, they have to pull it off.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of like Shep pallets and stuff like that.
And I think it's funny is 3PLs always also typically get the hard work. I see a ton of our 3PLs where they get floor loaded trailers that are stuffed to the bills with or the gills with boxes that are perfectly aligned so they can fit the optimal amount. And I look at that and I'm like, that's going to take hours and hours to unload. And then they palletize it, and sometimes they ship it onto the end customer's warehouse or they put on a rack or whatever. And they get a little bit of everything. And
Yeah.
I think it's we see a lot of like
I know intermodal containers are all floor loaded.
Yeah.
They don't have any pallets in them at all.
Yeah.
It's a waste of space.
we have our first customer now that actually has a rail car drop off.
Nice.
And so they there's a rail car that runs into the warehouse, kind of. It's an extension, and they unload it there, and that's a totally different process.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of everything with 3PLs. Brands are a little bit more consistent. The ones that do D2C as well as ship to store are also interesting because they try to consolidate as much as they can before sending that shipment to the store, so they get the most bang for their buck. And so, we see.
Let the store deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, we were working with, at the time it was Soriana, which is down in Mexico, which is a big grocery store type, or not grocery store, but like convenience store chain.
Mm-hmm.
And when in their DCs, they have basically lanes per store.
Yeah.
And so they build out these pallets of things for those stores, and they just like fill up the lanes.
Yep.
And then the trucks come in for each store.
Yep.
But these pallets can have random stuff on them. Like it's whatever that store ordered. And they're just stacking stuff up and then shrink wrapping it. It's not all the same stuff on a pallet.
Totally. We've seen
Grocery pickup.
well, I was gonna say we've been to a couple grocery DCs, and that's exactly. I mean, the store is out of bananas, eggs, milk, and cookies, and that's
That's what's on the
that all
pallet.
gets wrapped on the pallet and gets staged in the Reston, Virginia store lane
Slot, yeah.
And so it's a little bit of everything.
And these were nice because they were all rolling
Oh,
system.
nice.
So it was like 700 of them.
Yep.
And they could just fill up
Yeah.
each one of them and just push them down.
Yeah.
So they just kept pushing things down. It was really cool
Yeah.
the way they did that.
That's really impressive. Yeah, we see a lot of I would say brute forcing in the 3PL
You have
world.
to.
Yeah.
Well, especially if you're reconfiguring. That's one thing. They were a DC for themselves.
Right.
So it's different than a 3PL that has to reconfigure itself.
Every time
you get a new style of customer, consolidate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I don't envy 3PLs. They've got a hard job, and especially when you sign a 2-year contract. I mean, they can't. And we have a customer now. It's like I said, you could fit so much more inventory. And you would have to expand if you put this piece of automation in. And they said, yeah, but I need a customer to sign up for 10 years and co-invest in that automation with me. They only signed a 2-year commit. It's like, got it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so they throw labor at it.
Yeah.
And that's becoming harder and harder.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of the RAS model has really emerged for a lot of the AMR vendors as a really good solution for 3PLs. And that's why they're doing so well.
So RAS is rent.
Robotics as a service.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's typically in the...
It's like a monthly pay per bot.
You still commit to how many bots you want to use per month, and then you pay for the year and then all that kind of stuff. And then they typically give you burst capacity during peak season. But we see numerous customers where they've got bots sitting on the sidelines and it's just costing them money. And so and it's because they don't have that balance right. And I think...
Or they messed up, to your point, the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's an evolving Rubik's Cube that I think is only going to get more complicated.
That's the supply chain.
Well, guys, I want to let you get a jump on your weekend here.
Yeah.
Shout out time quick, or what you got going on trade show wise. I think you guys are going to Manifest, right? Did I see that?
Yeah, we'll be at Manifest. We got a booth at Manifest. Really excited about that. That's been an event we've been going to a few years now. And then this year we're actually going to be at ProMat as well. We'll be in the Zebra booth at ProMat. We're one of their selected vendors, so really honored to be part of that booth. And we've had a great relationship with Zebra and excited to show what we've been working on.
All right.
Yeah.
Good deal. Anything else? Just Manifest is a big thing, and then that's...
Yeah, Manifest, ProMat. I think we're going to Rhea this year as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Follow us on all of our socials.
Yeah.
We'll be posting feature updates and newsletters. Yeah, we just hired a marketing person, and so it won't look like we disappear after these big shows, and so we'll do a better job of posting going forward. So
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
Really
thanks
appreciate
for
you
having
coming
us
on.
on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, you can go back upstairs now.
Long commute.